Hello and welcome to the Epic Photography Podcast. This is episode number 11 and I, as always, am Peter Treadway, and hosting with me today are the wonderful Sian Elizabeth.
Hello, hello.
And the also wonderful Cathy Weatherston, Baitson. We've still not figured it out. She's having some kind of existential crisis, but it's Cathy. Hello, Cathy. How are you doing?
How's it going? How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I'm good. So, this is episode 11. Can't believe we are already 11 episodes into this. I hope you're enjoying reading the podcast. We're certainly enjoying recording it. So, long may this continue. Today, we are talking about mistakes to avoid when starting out in photography, and boy did I make a few. I don't know about you ladies.
So many.
Yeah, but there were some huge mistakes, and I think the bedrock for me anyway, the bedrock of all mistakes, and I'm just going to jump straight into it here. The bedrock of all mistakes for me was what is referred to as the Dunning-Kruger Effect. I don't know whether you ladies have ever heard of the Dunning-Kruger Effect.
No, I haven't.
But it's effectively, if you imagine a graph, and I think the best way to the best way to see this is to actually just Google it and look up the chart for yourself, because I can explain it, but it can sound fairly difficult, but it's a fairly simple process. But if you imagine a standard chart, and on the y-axis you have your confidence in your ability to do something, and on the x-axis you have your actual ability to do something. When you start out in photography, you buy your first DSLR, your first mirrorless camera, you put a nice shiny, say 50mm f1.8, f2 or even f1.4 lens on it. You take a photo, you've got that beautiful creamy bokeh in the background, your subject is pin sharp in focus, and you think, this is the greatest photo that has ever been taken in the history of photography. And naturally you're walking on air and you think you know absolutely everything about photography. However, the problem is that you might have out of focus elements in the background, you might have misfocused slightly, there might just be a number of things that are wrong with it, but it doesn't matter because it's your photo and it's the greatest photo that's ever been taken as far as you're concerned. So that is your confidence sky high. However, your ability is still right at the very bottom at the left-hand side of the graph. And so you actually don't really know anything. You're not able to do anything because you just don't have that knowledge yet. And so as time goes on, a little bit of time goes by, and you take some more photos, you start to do a bit of learning online, and you start to pick up on these things that you didn't see before. And all of a sudden, it's like a big roller coaster, and you start flying down, down, down as you hit, it's called the pit of despair, where you realise, actually, you know very little about photography. You have a nice camera, you can take a decent photo, but actually there's so many things now that you don't know, and you fall into a bit of a slump. But again, time goes on and you learn a little bit more, and slowly but surely your confidence in your ability starts to take off again, and to a point where it's a notion, it's a notional point. It could be a month, it could be 2 months, it could be years, but there comes a point where your confidence in your ability and your actual ability meet. And it generally rises like at a 45-degree angle in truth. But when you look at the Dunning-Kruger effect, it's almost like a roller coaster where your confidence is high, but you know very little, and then you come down and your confidence goes actually below your ability level. But again, you're just in such a pit of despair that you don't really know what you're doing, or you really hate your work, and then it starts to come back up again as your ability and your confidence meet. So I would say the biggest mistake I made in photography was having too much confidence at the beginning. And again, it's so easy to do. But I just try to have a bit of introspect when you start out. Look at other photographers that you admire. Do some online learning. Get to know all about how to take an amazing image. And hopefully you'll then avoid that mistake, because it can. The worst thing is to fall in that pit of despair. I don't know what you two ladies think, but I think the worst thing is eventually looking at one of your photos and thinking, I hate this. And it could be a perfectly decent photo, but just looking at your images and thinking, I hate this. What am I doing? I'm going to throw my camera away.
I mean, it's quite funny you should say that about the confidence, because I actually was the complete opposite to that. So,
okay.
And here's mistake number one. So I decided that I wanted to go backpacking after uni. Brilliant, but I wanted a camera. I didn't have enough money, so I decided to sell my laptop to get a camera, Now, obviously, you can see the problem with this.
Straight away.
Yeah. So that's mistake number one. So do not trade in your laptop for a camera. However, so what I had to do was only shoot JPEG. I didn't have enough memory to kind of store everything. So that was mistake number two. And then mistake number three, I decided that I wasn't going to put my camera on auto. I didn't read the manual, and I put my camera straight into manual, and just decided to learn from there through, trial and error. So even though it probably was the worst thing to do for my travels, because now I've got loads of really horrible pictures from my initial travels back in 2007. I look back now and go, well, if I hadn't have done that and put my camera into manual, I wouldn't know really what I know now. But I mean, that was a lot of wasted opportunity for some great pictures. I could have just put it into auto because it was a great camera. It's the Canon 400D.
Okay. Yeah.
And I could have got some really amazing shots from that, had I put it on auto. But stubborn me decided, no, I'm going to use manual, and that's how I'm going to learn. And of course, there's blurry images, there's overexposed, there's underexposed. It's just, but it was a great starting point. So even though that was a big mistake for my travel photos, I mean, I guess I just have to go back and do it again now that I know more. But
it's a perfect excuse to go back and do more traveling.
Yeah.
Where did you go? Where did you go, Sian, on that trip?
I started off in India, did Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, ended up in Australia, ran out of money, and then had to come home. So, yeah.
Oh, God.
Did you eventually buy a new laptop, though, to edit all of your images?
Do you know what I did? So, and then mistake number 4, I decided to sell my car that was at home so I could afford to buy a laptop when I reached Australia. So, and then I went into photography. So I came home, and even though I hadn't studied photography, I hadn't trained, I loved it so much for those, I think, 7 months traveling, taking photographs. I came back and I went into wedding photography. So it kind of all worked out really in the end. So it wasn't too bad.
Let me ask you then. You say you came back and you trained in photography. What process, what pathway did you take for your training? Was it formal or was it more at home, kind of teach yourself stuff?
Yeah, no, I basically taught myself traveling. That was my stick it in manual and see what happens. Yeah. And then when I got back, I joined a wedding photography company, and they sent me out straight away photographing weddings. And wow. I look back now and I think, oh my goodness, like I've actually looked at them the other day and I thought, wow, I can't believe someone let me take those pictures, and they loved them at the time. So they might look back now and go, oh.
Were you the primary shooter?
I was the only shooter.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Straight off, I think
wow,
I did.
Does that throw you in the deep end?
Yeah.
I know, yeah.
Does that wedding photography company still exist?
It does, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's the budget end.
We've all got to start somewhere. As I spoke about, we recorded an episode recently. I can't remember what episode number it was now, but
7.
We were talking. There you go. Thank you very much, Cathy.
You're welcome.
And we were talking about kind of how we got into wedding photography, and I said, same as you, my first wedding that I shot, I look back on the images now, and I won't say they're awful because the couple still love them, but they are a world away from kind of what I provide to couples now. But it is amazing how you do progress, and it is interesting to look back. And so, yes, you say it is a mistake to put your camera on full manual before you're ready to, but it is at least now, however many years later, it gives you the opportunity to go back and say, wow, well, actually, I have improved. At least I'm not still taking overexposed and underexposed and blurry images. So there is, I guess, there's a silver lining, in that cloud.
Yeah, definitely.
So how about you, Cathy? What mistakes would you have preferred to avoid?
Well, kind of like you, Peter. I suppose when I started, when I got a camera, my kids started school, and I wanted to get a nice, school photograph of them, and there wasn't any photographs at the time. So I just photographed the class, and I thought, oh my God, no, they were beautiful. They were done in natural light outside the door. There was no harsh shadows. And at the time I didn't realise that one of the fathers of one of the kids in the class had a photography school in town. And he says to me, oh my God, come to the class, and, you can skip the beginners and go straight to the intermediate and whatever. So I says, right, okay, I'll do that. So one of the things that we learned at that time was HDR. And there was a software, I think it was Photomatics at the time. Mm-hmm. right? Well, by God, I got in there. I don't know if you remember. But I thought, because they were so different, right, that it was brilliant. But it was actually shite. Like, they were so bad. Like, when I think about it, I went to the Phoenix Park, and I can't remember, I think it was one of the magazine photos. I can't remember where it was, but I know it was in the Phoenix Park, and I went and took the photographs. And they were so over-processed. You know what I mean? That, like, that's why I say I look at photographs and, you know, people starting off, and I think that's just one of the main mistakes that people make, is that they over-process their images. They oversaturate them. Their horizons aren't straight. Like, even with the clarity, they just bump everything up because they think that if it's going to be different, you know what I mean, that it's going to be better. But to be honest with you, less is more. You know, so like, I have a friend, and like, she has a camera phone, and she'd take most beautiful sunrises, and I'm like, do us a favor, I sent her a message, would you straighten your horizons? You know what I mean? And then she gets back to me, she goes, oh my God, ever since I've done that, I'm getting more likes on my photographs. Like, I says, just something simple like that, you know?
Yeah.
She'll probably be listening to this, and she'll message me going, that's me.
So it's quite interesting, because when I started out, one of the first weddings that I shot, and again, I mentioned this before in a previous episode, and this technique is almost like HDR. Although I feel like HDR is, I think you know what's
where
coming.
you're going with this.
The HDR sort of seems to have slipped away now, whereas what I'm about to say still seems to creep back in every now and then. But it's on the similar thread, and that is selective colour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's a double-edged sword for me, because I don't want to bemoan it too much, because it's almost, as I say, it's almost like a rite of passage when you become a photographer and when you start editing. It's that moment where you think, wow, I did that. I turned an image completely black and white, and then I just made part of it colour. And it can look really interesting, but I think, again, it comes back to the whole Dunning-Kruger effect, where you think it looks amazing, but actually it's just a little bit cliche and it's just a little bit old-fashioned. But I wouldn't want to say to anyone, don't do it. Because like Sian putting her camera on full manual when and all of her images coming out overexposed, underexposed, she learned something from that. And so I think from anything you can learn from isn't a waste of time. And what's the phrase about failure is only bad if you don't learn from it, effectively. If you fail at something and then leave it, well, then that's a true failure. If you fail at something and think, right, well, I won't do that again, it's not a failure. It's a teachable moment. You've learned something from it. And so I wouldn't tell people, absolutely, don't do selective colour. Do it, maybe, but maybe don't share the images. Because you'll probably get quite a bit of hate in online photography forums for it.
I suppose it's a good way of learning how to use layers, you know, like to,
Absolutely.
you know, it's a good practice, I would say, you know.
Absolutely.
For that, I suppose. And like, another thing is to look behind you when you're taking, because sometimes your best shots are taken from behind. So you know, when I hear Peter going, yes, you know what I'm talking about, don't you, honey?
You can be far too focused on the amazing scenery in front of you. Yeah, Cathy, go on. I'll let you tell the story.
Yeah, okay. So we were at the Giant's Causeway, and we got in. It was sunset, and it was a nice sunset. But I photographed the sunset, and I photographed Peter's boot. Do you remember that shot?
Yes, I do remember that. My boots look really cool. I think I've still got those boots somewhere.
Yeah, they're real, like, and they were matched in with the rocks. But anyway, so so I was there and I took a few, and I just turned around, and the glow of the sun just hit all the Giant's Causeway. I mean, they're like hexagons all the way up, and it's beautiful, and the glow of the orange sun just hit. It was like a mountain of rocks behind.
Yeah.
And I didn't say. I just turned around and I took the photograph.
Did you notice that, Sian? She didn't say anything. That's a mistake you can make in photography. Not telling your friends.
But you were too far away. You were all down. You were all down at the water edge. I just took a few steps back, and you know. And I think you smashed your lens at that stage. So I think. Yeah, you weren't in the best the best mood.
I'll come on to that in a minute.
Look what I got. And then the light disappears. You'd been doubly beat off.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So it was just beautiful, and I posted it, and Peter goes to me, when did you take that? I says, when I was with you guys. He goes, where was that? I went, behind you, Peter. Remember, you're always saying, always look behind, always look behind. So that's one great tip. Always just like
look around,
circle. You know, I can't think it was was it Thomas Heaton or something? I can't remember. I remember looking on YouTube one day, and there was one guy who was a landscape photographer, and he had all his gear with him. He put it down on the ground, and he took out his iPhone. And he put his iPhone in front of him, and he just kept turning around. Because sometimes he says, you would see something in that iPhone that you just stop and go, oh, that's a beautiful composition.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, so because it's in the phone, it's smaller and it's framed. So when you're looking at a landscape and you've got the whole view in front of you, it's harder to visualize a smaller picture in that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So that's another good thing when you're doing like the likes of landscapes. Take out your phone and just, you know, circle around and go up and go down, and because something will catch your eye, and then try and photograph that.
I think that's also the same for if you're doing like portraits as well. So beauty, fashion, or if you're on location, weddings as well. If you just move around, because obviously you can have someone standing somewhere and it could be a wonderful backdrop or whatever, but there might be a better angle or a more interesting backdrop, or, you know, the light might be better somewhere else. And I think it's important that we aren't stuck to one position. Like, I think, you know, we should learn to move around a bit more. And sometimes having lenses, especially like, you know, like a telephoto lens, I think you can get a bit stuck in one place. And I think it's just important to, just move around a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting that the iPhone or Android phone, whatever you've got, Samsung, has almost become now the new version of the director frame fingers, where you move in and out, and you no longer need to look like a complete moron doing the frame fingers in and out, because you just take your camera and you can move around with your camera and frame your shots that way. But
I was just reading.
Oh, sorry, go on, Cathy.
I was going to say, I was just reading something this morning. I didn't get to read the full article, but it was somebody who shot a full wedding with their iPhone.
Really?
So, so I was like, oh, that's interesting. So, but you know the way we're photographing a wedding in a couple of weeks?
Yes.
Peter, yeah. So maybe we should, during that, obviously we're not going to take it with our iPhone. But
I was going to say, do you want me to just do iPhone shots?
No.
I was saving me bringing loads of gear over.
But maybe during that, we should take a few photographs with our phone. Yeah, and just try as a, you know, and maybe we can do an episode on that. And I'm going over to Stephanie to photograph a wedding in Miami with her. And I'll say to her as well, take some with your iPhone, and maybe the three of us can edit them and see what we get.
Compare and contrast.
Yeah, and see the challenges. You know, obviously, you know, just take one or two. You don't have to go mad, you know what I mean? But I
think that'd be a good idea to put it into our Facebook group as well, actually. So, and maybe other people can get involved too. Like if there's a comparison of, you know, they're out taking photos of a landscape or a portrait, whatever. Like you just said, you know, use your camera for one of them, use your iPhone for another, and see which one people prefer. Because actually, sometimes some people have actually preferred iPhone shots to the actual camera.
So the iPhones, they shoot in RAW now. So, you know, they have a RAW setting, and a lot of them, we were out, Tony Harmon was over, Peter, a while ago, and he used his phone for a lot of the shots. He says, I just didn't want to carry camera gear with me. And he edited those and put them on, Instagram, and they were, no way you'd think they were done with a phone, like, you know. So.
I mean, Tony, I mean, he is the design ninja.
He's amazing.
He's a photo editing ninja as well. So, yeah, some of the programs that he uses, I mean, it's mainly Adobe, but the way he uses them and the tips and tricks that he's got are just incredible. So yeah, definitely, if any of our readers haven't yet heard of Tony Harmon, you should definitely go and check out his stuff, because he's an incredible educator as well. Just to he often takes to the stage at the photography show every year at the Birmingham NEC, and people are just captivated by him because he's got such an engaging and comedic style to him.
Full of life.
He is, very much so.
Actually, that's a good point. Coming back to software editing, and you saying about how people kind of oversaturate and things, and selective color. I think that's another thing with the coming back to things like composition and things, and framing your image and editing it in the software. A lot of people, they kind of decide to crop people's limbs in weird places. So I think that's another one to avoid. Like starting out, you kind of don't really notice it too much, and you look at the whole thing, and you're not really focusing on those certain details. But especially for like wedding photography, I mean, there was a trend. There's a huge trend actually, probably like 10 years ago, about just obviously chopping heads off, but some people weren't, and like making the composition in a way that it actually looked on purpose.
Yeah.
It looked kind of, as in the wrong kind of crop, where there's probably just a bit of chin left in, or So I think it's about knowing where to, if you're cropping limbs and things like that, knowing where to do it on someone so that it actually looks like it's on purpose, as opposed to you've just made a mistake.
They always say, don't chop at the wrists, the elbows, the ankles. You know what I mean? They're kind of... But some people would never think of that.
No.
It's funny you should say that, because I remember when you're talking about kind of cutting the tops of people's heads off, I remember, I think it was Scott Kelby did a class on Kelby One. It was a portrait photography class. And he did the editing afterwards, and he showed... It was like a real close-up image, and he cut the top of the model's head off, and he was explaining like it's fine to do that if you are doing it on purpose and with a purpose, and like if you want a really nice tight crop. So I think it's a difficult balancing act, but it's definitely something that you want to do because you meant to do it, as opposed to something that it has happened by mistake.
Yeah, because I think I watched Peter Hurley doing that on his, and he was cropping all the tops off. And I remember, I don't know what it was I was watching, but he goes, everyone knows what the top of the head looks like. You know what I mean? And I was like, yeah, that's right. I was like, focus in on the eyes. And from there out, once I heard that, I do that now. You know what I mean? And it does make a difference, definitely.
So again, but then going back to something like fashion photography, a lot of the rules there are actually thrown out the window. So it's very hard to say, in one respect, if you're doing weddings, make sure you do crop properly. But in another respect, with fashion photography, sometimes the rules don't apply. However, you need to learn the rules in order to break them that it actually looks like it's on purpose.
And I guess, Sian, you can answer for this, being a fashion photographer. Like, I've never shot fashion, but I'm assuming that in fashion photography, your subject is... the dress, is the shirt, is the clothing. It's not the model necessarily that's wearing it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you just have to, and also it depends on what the client wants, actually. So if they want a more sort of a close up of things like buttons on a shirt or things like that, you have to frame it right. And again, coming back to things like chopping heads off, actually in fashion, quite a lot of the time, you'll have, especially like male models, you won't have their forehead in frame. It'll be something to do with if they're selling a torso for their shirt or whatever. So it's I think a good tip for that actually is to buy magazines and go through images from from the adverts that you see, from photo shoots in the magazines, and pull out what you like, because the more you do that, the more you'll kind of understand what rules can be broken, how you can frame a subject, poses and things like that, and then you can apply it to your own work.
That's really really pertinent, actually, because I noticed when I really started getting into photography, like I can't watch a film now and completely follow the storyline or the plot, because I'm always like, when it's in any scene, obviously all photography and cinematography is about light, and so now whenever I'm watching a film, I'm always like, how have they got the light to hit the actor on that part of their face? And I'm always looking at kind of lighting angles and stuff. And so it's interesting that you say pull out magazines and have a look at what's popular and what you like, because you can almost reverse engineer from any image that you see, and you can see the catch lights in the eyes, or you can see like a bit of a kicker light behind them. And so as you say, you can you will intrinsically look at an image and think, I like that. And then you can delve deeper into it and think, well, why do I like that? What is it about that image that kind of draws me in? Yeah. And I think that's not just fashion. I think that's true of any image. And then if you can learn to reverse engineer that image to see where the lighting's coming from, kind of what kind of modifiers they've got, where the photographer's standing, where how the model is turning their head, I think that could be really powerful and really useful as well. And
the colour grading too is amazing.
Absolutely.
That's what I notice now, where I never noticed before, and now. It's the exact same, Peter. I'm looking at film and I'm like, wow, look at the color grading on that, and as well as the lighting. You know what I mean? It's incredible. Like the work they do on it. But that's another thing. And I was just thinking now before I forget, is to shoot in RAW instead of JPEG, because RAW brings out so much detail. As Peter explained in episode 3. wasn't it? The difference between
yes,
shooting raw and Jake. So if they want to go back and listen to that, there's just so much detail with raw, because JPEGs are kind of baked it's processed in camera and there's just, I mean, with raw you can bring up more details in the shadows and everything else. But as Peter's explained in episode 3, if they want to go back and listen to that, definitely shoot in raw.
And actually, in the show notes of episode 3, we've posted it was an article I did, a blog post for expertphotography.com, and there's I did an article about the differences between shooting RAW and JPEG, and how you can pull more information out of the RAW, and how the JPEG will start to degrade the more editing you do to it. So go back, and if you haven't listened to it yet, go back and check episode 3 and have a look at that article as well, because it is, even if I do say so myself, it is quite interesting.
I think that's quite good. Have a read of that. I think that's quite good what you're both saying there, but basically having a plan. So when you sort of go out to shoot anything, obviously go and shoot and have fun and make mistakes, because that's how you learn. But if you do have a specific shoot in mind, do some planning behind it. So everything from, what kind of lighting, modifiers, things like that you want to use, the posing, the styling of the model, if you're using a model, or if you're doing travel, the sort of composition, like go out the night before, like you're saying, Cathy, use your phone and, scout the location, have a look, see what it looks like on the phone. And then all the way through to the final post-processing. So like you're saying, you're colour grading. So if you have that plan in mind, you're going with a purpose, and then your images from there will hopefully be more successful, because you've had that initial, plan in your mind.
Absolutely.
Well, that's what I always do, is scout the location before I do a wedding. To go and walk. Myself and Peter, sometimes we'd get there early and we'd walk around, and so I do the detail shots beforehand, before the wedding. So sometimes I would meet the couple at the location and of where they're getting married, at a hotel, and I would say, come on, and we walk the grounds. And as I'm walking there, I said, this would be a great one. And I think it saves time as well, because you're saying to them, right, we can get one here and we can take a shot like this. So when you're going around, it says, right, we're going to do this one that we talked about yesterday. So always scout the location, I think, beforehand. I think that's a great one. So Peter,
and also, just leading on from that, having a shot list as well. And this is imperative for wedding photography, but it also for, like, even if you're doing landscapes, if you have a list of the sorts of shots that you want to get, then it stops you wasting your time. And again, as I say, it's imperative for weddings. You only have a finite amount of time to shoot, and also a finite amount of time to keep people's interest while you're shooting. And so if you've got a big group of people together and you're saying, right, let's have Aunt Mabel, Uncle Dick, and this, that, and the other, and then get them out. Okay, right, who am I shooting now? Right, well, if I grab this person, oh no, hang on, I need to do them as well, and it can become a nightmare. Whereas if you say, right, great Aunt Mabel, great Uncle Dick, you get in there, right, we've got that one, right, who's on the list, right, Mum and Dad's next, right, brothers and sisters, right, you're in next. It just speeds up the whole process. It makes you look more professional as well, because there's nothing worse than standing around just thinking, right, what do I need to do next? Who am I shooting? What am I doing? So it makes you look more professional. It saves you time.
Group shots are hard. Trying to get everybody together. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I got a list, myself and Peter, and she wanted mainly group shots. Rather than, we did some of them together, but they wanted a lot of group shots, because they said they never get them, all the families together, all the friends. And there was a list, and Peter's there, organised, right, everybody. He didn't even need a microphone. It's like, and it just had them all lined up and all ready to go. And we had, I think it was the manager coming out going, we've only got like 15 minutes to do this. I was like, yeah, that's no problem. And we did. We got it done. Yeah.
See, I always used to get the best man involved and say, right, your job for today is getting everyone together for the group shots.
Get them to allocate somebody. Yeah, I mean, definitely.
Put them to work.
But and I think just going. Sorry, Sian, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, one of the most essential things to do from any photo shoot is please back up your work. Like, make sure if you're putting it onto your computer, put it onto a separate hard drive as well, just in case, or upload it to the cloud or somewhere, because when you lose images, especially if it's for a client, I've not done that, touch wood, but I know people that have, and it's heartbreaking, and you just, there's nothing you can do about it. So it's back up.
Immediately, Cathy and I think both do the same. Immediately we come back from a wedding. It doesn't matter how late in the evening it is. I could have travelled halfway across the country to get back from this wedding. It's 1-2 o'clock in the morning. First thing I do as soon as I get back in, the cards come out of the camera and they get backed up. straight to my computer. That means immediately you've got
Same
two
here.
copies. You've got two copies. You've got one on the computer, and the original copy obviously still on the card.
Yep.
There's I don't know who came up with it. I'm going to say Robert Vanelli, but it may have transcended him. It may have come from someone before him. But there's a method called, or process called, the 3-2-1 process. I don't know whether you've heard about this for backing up your images. So the 3-2-1 process is you should have 3 copies of any image on 2 different types of media, and one of those should be off-site. So three backups, that's obvious enough. You want to have three copies of each image or each set of images, 2 different types of media. So you want one on, say, a
hard drive.
An old type of cyclical hard drive. I'm trying to think, solid state, a solid state hard drive, and then another copy on an old cyclical hard drive, and the offsite in the cloud. Although, as we all know, there is no such thing as the cloud. It's just somebody else's computer. But I digress. You want a copy of it in the cloud. So if the worst comes to the worst, if your solid state drive goes down, if your old style hard drive goes down, you still have that copy saved in the cloud. So yeah, I think that's really the 3-2-1 process. I'm sure it was Rob Vanelli that came up with that, but
it could be. I don't use I don't edit on or use the cards that I took the photographs on.
No.
Till the bride has their album and has all their digitals and everything, because I'm always afraid if something happens to them, or if my computer goes or anything, like I'm just terrified to copy over them. So they don't get cleared, they don't get formatted till all the work is done and finished.
And finally, that alludes to another common mistake actually in when starting out, is not having enough memory. Not having enough card storage. Back in the day, of compact flash cards, they were mega expensive.
Yeah, so expensive.
Memory now is. I'm not talking about is it XQD cards that some of the newest mirrorless cameras use. Even in the new mirrorless cameras, you can still use standard SanDisk or Lexar Pro or whoever you want. Just the standard memory cards. They're not expensive anymore. Even they're not expensive any day. But if you have something like Black Friday deals or Amazon Prime Day or anything like that, you can cut the price even more. Yeah. There's no excuse now for not having enough memory cards. There's nothing worse. There's nothing worse than being out on a shoot, running out of space, and then having to go back through some of your images. I don't really like that one. I'll delete that one to make a bit more space. It's an awful feeling. So yeah, just that's another mistake to avoid. Don't skimp on your memory cards.
What have you guys done with your old compact flash cards? Because I still have some with obviously images on, but I don't have a reader now to read it, so I've got no idea what's on there.
So mine are in a drawer in my computer room, in a bottom drawer somewhere. And every so often I come across them, and I do still have the reader for them, believe it or not. And I throw it in there, and I think I don't know, is it? I think of one of them, I've got like a 12 megabyte card. 12 megabytes.
I think that's mine as well.
I literally...
Or there was 236 or something like that. I think it was another... but yeah, I still have mine. I still have them. I never got rid of them. I actually should look at them, see what's on them. And I think the card reader that I have on my desk somewhere actually, does have because it's like a multi one here. So it
is interesting to go back and look at some of those images. But yeah, I tried to put it in one of my newer cameras. I think it might have been the D700, was the Nikon D700 was the last one of my cameras that has a compact flash slot. And I think I was able to take like 3 images, and not even that. I think it was 2 images on this 12 megabyte card. It was just ridiculous. So yeah, they've just been consigned to history in the bottom drawer of my computer room.
Mine are probably the bracketing shots that I converted to the HDR. And I must actually go back and check, because I would edit them totally different now.
Archaeologists are going to dig those up in thousands of years. I think, are these what images were like in the 2000s?
Yeah, but that's a good thing to learn as well, is learn how to bracket your shots, you know what I mean? Because that's that's another way of getting the details and the shadows and the highlights and blending them all together, and it's very easy to do in Lightroom now, so
and I think that's the thing, like I think HDR, and this might be why, having thought about it, this might be why that type of kind of extreme contrast de-ghosted HDR has sort of fallen by the wayside, because HDR now is a lot more subtle, like in Lightroom and Photoshop. It is more just about slightly pulling the shadows up and kind of dropping the highlights. It isn't that extreme, wow, kind of cut your eyes on the image type of HDR that we used to see, kind of 5, 10, 15 years ago.
But, and focusing is another thing as well, is, oh my God, use a tripod. If you're doing landscape in low light, use a tripod, because you get people that come out, they have their handheld and they don't understand where they're not getting that pin sharp or, shot, or it's grainy. And like, if you have it on a tripod, you can put it at ISO 100 and you can get a pin sharp, obviously using the right settings.
Yeah.
Do you know, even better than a tripod is a platypod.
Yes.
Platypod, who are the epic sponsors of the Epic Photography Podcast.
Yes.
And they make the world's most compact tripod bases. So, hey, look, holding up to the camera now, the Max and the Ultra. They're both here, sat right by my camera, ready to go, throw in my go bag whenever I need to.
Yeah, mine's behind me where I have the ball head, because somebody was like, how do you use that? And I go, you have to put a ball head on top, because they just didn't. They're thinking, can I just screw the camera onto it? I'm like, no, mine is just above my head here. It's kind of.
So just going to the platypod actually. So another thing, if you don't have to just use it as a tripod for your camera, I've actually been using it for my pro photo lights. So I can use it on the floor as a backdrop light, and it's just so handy because it can actually support the weight of the light, which is brilliant. And then it just means I can carry one less stand with me. So
absolutely. So I did that. I shot a wedding a couple of years ago now. It would have been a couple of years ago now, in upstate New York with Stephanie. And I had no room and no weight allowance left for even my ultralight 3-legged thing tripod. Just had no room for it. And at that time, I'd only just become aware of platypod. So I did a bit more research into it, and I bought the Platypod Max, took that with me, and I was like, I don't know whether it's going to hold up, whether I'm going to be able to use it. Again, I knew nothing really about them at this point. Took it to the wedding, didn't end up using it as a tripod for my camera, as you suggest, Sian, but I used it for my Godox AD200.
Yeah.
And I would say with the strap that comes with it, I put it on a strut to the side of the dance floor, strapped it on, put the light on there, and I had fantastic angular sideways light for the whole of the reception. So nice. They are incredibly.
I've used it on a tree. Strapped
Have
it
you
to
really?
a tree. Yeah, the Godox as well, the 200. Strapped it to a tree because I couldn't. I had nobody there at the time to hold the light for me. I didn't have my portable light stand. Is that what you call it? Somebody has another name for it. I think Stephanie has another name.
Yeah,
for
Val.
That.
It's the voice assisted light,
voice activated light stand. Yeah. So anyway, So I was like, oh my God, and I was like, oh my God, I have my platypod with me, and then I was like, I hope I have my straps, but I did. I had the straps, and it was just a tree was there. It was a small tree. Wrapped it around, put my Godox on it, so they were backlit. Using that, and I was kind of raging I didn't do a BTS, on it. But when you're doing a wedding, you're flying along. But the next time I will, definitely, So.
Well, I sorry, go on, Sian.
No, I was just going to say, I think we're almost running out of time, aren't we?
So was I. Yeah, I think we are pretty much at the end because we don't want to waste.
I know we could go on forever with all the news,
I know. I think we'll have to do another one talking about this.
We've all made so many mistakes. That's the problem. But yes, we don't want to waste any more of our dear readers' time. And having said that, that reminds me that we still haven't explained why I call people readers, but we will. I promise we will get round to it in the next
episode 100.
Keep listening because we will get to it. But thank you, dear readers, for joining us this week on the Epic Photography Podcast, sponsored by our epic sponsor, Platypod Tripods, who make the world's most compact tripod bases. Next week's episode, I believe, is going to be Fernando Santos and Scott Kelby. They may also have one other co-host joining them for that, so make sure to tune in for that. I just want to remind you that we are also across all social media platforms. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter. Go and find us there. Ask us any questions that you want. Let us know anything that you'd like to hear on the podcast, anything you'd like us to talk about, and any suggestions and any feedback. We'd absolutely love to hear it. Thanks very much from me. Thanks very much from Sian and Cathy, and we hope to see you on the next episode. Take care, guys. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.